3 days after the orchard incident, James was inspecting his young apple trees for any damage when he spotted a familiar SUV pulling into his driveway. His first instinct was wariness. Another confrontation was the last thing he needed. But when Sophia emerged alone from the passenger side, he was surprised to see the vehicle drive away, leaving her standing uncertainly at the edge of his property. James waved, inviting her to join him among the trees. She approached cautiously, dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt, a stark contrast to the elaborate dress she'd been wearing for her failed birthday party. "How did you get here?" James asked, genuinely curious why Karen would have dropped her daughter off after everything that had happened. "My friend Emma drove me," Sophia replied, glancing back at the departing SUV. "My parents think I'm at her house studying." James raised an eyebrow. "So they wouldn't approve of you being here?" "Months still." Sophia made an explosive gesture with her hands. "She's talking about property values and rural zoning laws now. Dad's firm is drafting some kind of community petition." James sighed. "Some battles never ended in rural suburban borders. I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Sophia said with unexpected firmness. "They're being ridiculous. That's actually why I came." She pulled a notebook from her backpack. "I'm doing this environmental science project about sustainable agriculture, and I thought, well, maybe something good could come out of all this." As they walked through the orchard, James found himself impressed by Sophia's thoughtful questions. She wanted to know about integrated pest management, beneficial insects, and water conservation, topics that revealed genuine interest beyond a simple school assignment. "This isn't just about your project, is it?" James asked as they paused near the beehives at the orchard's edge. Sophia looked down, scuffing the soil with her shoe. "My grandfather was a farmer in Nebraska. Before he died, he used to tell me about working with the land, not against it. Mom never talks about that part of our family." Understanding dawned on James. "So this project is personal." "Mom's always been embarrassed about coming from a farming family," Sophia explained. "When we moved here, she was determined to fit in with the country club crowd. That's why she hates living next to an actual working farm. It reminds her of what she's trying to escape." James nodded thoughtfully. Karen's antagonism suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just about property values or inconvenience. It was about identity. "You know," he said, "there's a junior program with the County Agricultural Extension. They teach high school students about sustainable farming practices, soil science, even business management for agricultural enterprises." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really? That sounds amazing." "They meet Tuesday evenings at the community college," James continued. "I volunteer there sometimes. I could put in a good word for you, even though the program's technically full for this semester." "My mom would never agree to drive me," Sophia said, her enthusiasm dimming. James smiled. "I drive right past your subdivision on my way there. I could pick you up, with your parents' permission, of course." Sophia's laugh was skeptical. "After what happened, you'd still do that for me?" "The way I see it," James replied, "good neighbors aren't about property lines or homeowners associations. They're about building community, even when it's complicated." As they walked back toward the farmhouse, a text alert chimed on Sophia's phone. Her friend returning to pick her up. But before she left, she asked a question that caught James by surprise. "Do you think I could bring some of my friends here sometime?" "Not for a party," she added quickly, "but to learn about the orchard. Most of them have never seen where their food actually comes from." As the sheriff's radio crackled with dispatch updates, the two HOA board members, Diane Prescott and Harold Cunningham, approached with clipboards in hand, as if official documentation might somehow strengthen their position. "Mr. Fletcher," Diane began in her practiced customer service voice, "perhaps we can reach a compromise. The Whitmans are valuable members of our community, and this party represents a significant investment." James had dealt with the HOA before, particularly when they complained about his beehives being too close to their property line. "There's no compromise to be made here. This is private agricultural land being used without permission, and there's a scheduled crop dusting that cannot be postponed." Harold stepped forward, his polo shirt embroidered with the HOA logo. "We understand your position, but surely you can see how this appears. A whole community has come together for this young girl's celebration, and one farmer is standing in the way. One farmer whose property you're trespassing on. Sheriff Howell interjected, having overheard the conversation. Mr. Cunningham, Mrs. Prescott, I'd advise you to step back and let me handle this. The rental workers had begun slowly dismantling some of the decorations, clearly sensing which way the wind was blowing. Karen noticed and rushed over, waving her hands frantically. Stop! Don't take anything down. Mark is handling this. She turned to her husband expectantly. Mark was pacing near the orchard's edge, phone pressed to his ear, his voice rising in frustration. Edward, I understand you're at your daughter's soccer game, but this is an emergency. Yes, I know it's Saturday. No, it can't wait until Monday. James watched the scene unfold with a mix of frustration and vindication. He hadn't wanted this confrontation, but Karen had forced his hand by assuming she could simply appropriate his land without consequences. James, Sheriff Howell said quietly, stepping aside with him, you're completely within your rights here, but this is getting messy. Any chance you could postpone the spraying might save everyone a lot of trouble. Dale, you know I can't, James replied. Atlantic Crop Services books out months in advance. If I cancel today, I might not get another slot until after harvest. I've got signs of apple maggot fly in the northeast quadrant that could spread to the entire orchard if not treated promptly. The sheriff nodded, understanding the agricultural reality that the Whitmans seemed determined to ignore. All right then, I'll start the formal removal process. Across the orchard, a new complication arrived. A white SUV with Sunshine Catering emblazoned on the side pulled up, and a harried-looking woman in chef's whites emerged, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Whitman, we have the cake and food ready to set up. The caterer stopped short, taking in the tense scene and the sheriff's presence. Karen rushed over. Yes, set up by the large tent. Everything is fine. Sheriff Howell intercepted the caterer. Ma'am, I need to inform you that this is private property, and the owner has not granted permission for this event. Additionally, there will be aerial pesticide application beginning at 2:00 p.m. The caterer's eyes widened. Pesticides? We can't serve food under those conditions. That would violate health department regulations and our insurance policies. Karen's carefully constructed party was unraveling thread by thread, and her composed facade began to crack as the reality of the situation dawned on her. Her daughter's perfect Sweet 16 was collapsing before her eyes, and the audience of neighbors and service providers was growing by the minute. The birthday girl's friends had gathered in a tight cluster near Karen's SUV, smartphones recording the unfolding drama. One girl was already live-streaming the event, providing running commentary to an invisible audience. And now Sophia's mom is totally freaking out on this farmer guy. And there are actual police here. This was supposed to be the most epic Sweet 16 ever, but it's turning into a total disaster movie. Sophia herself sat alone on a decorative hay bale that had been unloaded for rustic photo opportunities, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Unlike her mother, who was still frantically trying to salvage the situation, Sophia seemed resigned to the party's collapse. Mark returned from his call, his expression grim. The judge won't issue an emergency injunction on a Saturday without clear evidence of imminent harm. He says a scheduled agricultural procedure on agricultural land doesn't qualify. This is ridiculous. Karen exploded, loud enough for everyone to hear. What about the harm to our daughter? What about the thousands of dollars we've spent? Doesn't that count for anything? James, who had been quietly observing from a distance, felt a growing discomfort. While Karen had clearly overstepped boundaries, he took no pleasure in seeing a teenager's birthday ruined. He approached Sophia cautiously, aware of the girl's friends watching his every move. Hey, he said, keeping his voice gentle. I'm really sorry this is happening on your birthday. Sophia looked up, her carefully applied makeup now smudged. It's not your fault. I told Mom this was a bad idea, but she never listens. She gestured around at the half-dismantled party scene. She's always trying to outdo everyone else in the neighborhood. Last year, it was a hot air balloon for my brother's graduation. This year, it's an orchard party with authentic farm atmosphere. She made air quotes with her fingers. James nodded, understanding dawning. Your mom didn't just pick my orchard for the scenery, did she? No, Sophia admitted. Mrs. Hargrove had her daughter's sweet 16 at her uncle's vineyard last month. Mom couldn't stand that everyone was still talking about it. From the periphery of the orchard came the distant sound of vehicles, more guests arriving, unaware of the chaos awaiting them. James saw Karen's expression shift from anger to panic as she realized her social standing was about to take a very public hit. The sheriff approached them, radio in hand. Mr. Fletcher, I just got word from my deputy. We've got about 15 cars trying to turn into your access road. What do you want us to do? Before James could answer, the distinctive sound of an airplane engine buzzed in the distance. The crop duster was arriving early to survey the area before beginning its runs. The effect was immediate. The rental workers, who had been dragging their feet at Karen's insistence, suddenly accelerated their packing efforts. The caterers began loading food trays back into their van. Party guests who had just arrived stood confused at the orchard's edge, watching workers flee like ants from a disturbed hill. That's just the pilot doing a preliminary flyover, James explained to the sheriff. He always checks the area before starting the actual application. But Karen didn't know that. Her face paled as she looked skyward, then at the dozens of confused teenagers gathered around her daughter. Mom, Sophia said, rising from the hay bale with unexpected composure, it's over. Just stop. Karen's smile vanished entirely, replaced by a cold stare. You're bluffing. Nobody would schedule something dangerous on a Saturday afternoon. Crop dusting isn't dangerous when done properly, James replied, his patience wearing thin. It's a normal agricultural practice, and Saturday is when most pilots are available. I posted the required notification signs at all property boundaries 3 days ago, as required by law. He pointed to a yellow sign at the edge of the orchard that warned of aerial application of pesticides. Karen squinted at the distant sign, then waved dismissively. Those can't possibly be legal. I would have noticed them during my morning walks. They're on my property, not the walking trail, James explained. Look, Karen, I understand this is inconvenient, but I'm not making this up. The crop duster is scheduled. The chemicals are already mixed to the proper concentration, and the spraying has to happen during this specific window for pest control to be effective. One of the catering staff approached cautiously. Ma'am, should we continue setting up or? Karen held up her hand, silencing him without taking her eyes off James. This is ridiculous. You're just being difficult because I didn't go through some formal permission process. This is exactly the problem with you rural types, so obsessed with property lines and procedures. James fought to keep his voice level. It's not about being difficult. It's about safety and respecting boundaries. The pesticide isn't something you want to expose 50 teenagers to, even if it is organic. Organic? Karen scoffed. Please. You probably use all sorts of toxic chemicals on these trees. That's why our HOA has been trying to get the zoning changed. Farms like yours shouldn't be this close to residential areas. James felt his face grow hot. This wasn't just about a party anymore. My orchard was here 50 years before your subdivision was built. I use fewer chemicals than your lawn service does. A black SUV pulled into the orchard lane, and James recognized Karen's husband Mark stepping out, his expression thunderous. Karen must have texted him during their conversation. What's the problem here? Mark demanded, striding toward them in his expensive loafers, unsuitable for the soft orchard soil. Karen turned to her husband with an exasperated gesture. James is threatening to spray chemicals all over Sophia's party. He claims he has some plane coming at 2 o'clock. Mark turned to James, lawyer mode fully engaged. Is this true? You're planning to disrupt a miner's birthday celebration with hazardous materials. I have a legally scheduled crop dusting appointment, James repeated firmly. Your wife set up on my land without permission, and yes, there will be a plane applying organic pesticide this afternoon. That's not negotiable. Mark's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. I know Judge Harriman personally. One call from me, and I can have an emergency injunction against any aerial spraying within hours. And one call from me to the sheriff will have you both removed for trespassing within minutes, James countered, pulling out his phone. Your choice. The catering staff and tent workers had stopped working, watching the confrontation unfold with uncomfortable expressions. One of them, an older man, approached Karen hesitantly. Ma'am, if there's going to be crop dusting, we really can't stay. Our insurance doesn't cover exposure to agricultural chemicals, even organic ones. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Karen's face as she realized the situation might be slipping from her control. She looked at the half-assembled tents, the tables of decorations, and the catering van still being unloaded. This isn't over, Mark warned, placing a protective arm around his wife while pulling out his own phone. Not by a long shot. James stood rooted to the spot, his coffee growing cold in his hand, as he watched Karen's workers trampling between his carefully tended rows of apple trees. 15 years of meticulous care, of waking before dawn during frost warnings to protect delicate buds, of researching organic growing methods to produce the sweetest fruit possible. And now party rental employees were dragging heavy equipment across his soil, compacting it in ways that could harm his trees' root systems. Karen, he tried again, his voice strained with forced politeness. This isn't public land. You can't just set up here without asking. Karen waved her hand, dismissively while checking something on her phone. Oh, don't be so territorial, James. It's not like we're hurting anything. Besides, this unused space is perfect for the party. My Sophia deserves the best for her sweet 16. James felt his blood pressure rising. The unused space Karen referred to as his younger orchard section, where trees planted 3 years ago were just beginning to establish themselves. The soil here had been specially amended, the irrigation system meticulously calibrated. You need to pack up and leave, he said firmly. Now. Karen finally looked up from her phone, her practiced smile slipping. Excuse me, I've already paid these workers a non-refundable deposit. The caterers will be here in 2 hours. The party starts at noon. That's not my problem, James replied. You should have asked permission before spending a dime. A worker approached, holding a string of fairy lights. Ma'am, where do you want these strung? Between the trees. Before Karen could answer, James stepped forward. Nowhere. This is private property, and you don't have permission to be here. The worker's eyes widened as he looked between James and Karen. I was told this was arranged. It wasn't, James said flatly. Karen laughed. The sound brittle and forced. James is just being difficult. He's always complaining about something. Our landscaping, our house lights, our community pool. Now he's making a fuss about letting a 16-year-old girl have her birthday party. James felt a dozen pairs of eyes on him, including those of the rental company employees who had paused in their work. Karen had cleverly positioned him as the villain, the grumpy farmer ruining a teenage girl's special day. He took a deep breath. I have crop dusting scheduled for this afternoon. The pilot will be spraying organic pesticide throughout the orchard at 2:00 p.m. It's been scheduled for weeks. The chemicals are safe when used properly, but not if people are standing directly underneath. For a brief moment, Karen's confident facade cracked. Then she rallied. Well, obviously you'll have to reschedule. I have 50 teenagers coming, including Councilman Berger's daughter. I'm sure you don't want to explain to him why his daughter's designer dress got ruined by your spray. James noticed one of the workers quietly setting down the string lights, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Another was whispering to his colleague, both glancing nervously in James's direction. I'm going inside to call the sheriff, James said calmly. You have 30 minutes to clear out before this becomes a formal trespassing complaint. As he turned to walk back to his farmhouse, he heard Karen's voice rising behind him. You can't do this. Do you know how much I've spent? James Fletcher, don't you dare walk away from me. James didn't turn around. He had a crop to protect and a business to run. Karen Whitman was about to learn a valuable lesson about rural life and property boundaries, one way or another.